Two Concepts of Liberty is probably one of the most influential and commented upon essays in political philosophy to have emerged in the last century. It was originally delivered in 1958 by Isaiah Berlin. Berlin broke down liberty into two concepts, negative and positive, and as Berlin showed, negative and positive liberty are not merely two distinct kinds of liberty, they can be seen as rival, incompatible interpretations of a single political idea. Since few people claim to be against liberty, the way this term is interpreted and defined can have important political implications. The following story demonstrates negative and positive liberty. Imagine you are driving a car through town, and you come to a fork in the road. You turn left, but no one was forcing you to go one way or the other. Next you come to a crossroads. You turn right, but no one was preventing you from going left or straight on. There is no traffic to speak of and there are no diversions or police roadblocks. So you seem, as a driver, to be completely free. But this picture of your situation might change quite dramatically if we consider that the reason you went left and then right is that you're addicted to cigarettes and you're desperate to get to the tobacconist's before it closes. Rather than driving, you feel you are being driven, as your urge to smoke leads you uncontrollably to turn the wheel first to the left and then to the right. Moreover, you're perfectly aware that your turning right at the crossroads means you'll probably miss a train that was to take you to an appointment you care about very much. You long to be free of this irrational desire that is not only threatening your longevity but is also stopping you right now from doing what you think you ought to be doing. This story gives us two contrasting ways of thinking of liberty. On the one hand, one can think of liberty as the absence of obstacles external to the agent. You are free if no one is stopping you from doing whatever you might want to do. In the above story you appear, in this sense, to be free. On the other hand, one can think of liberty as the presence of control on the part of the agent. To be free, you must be self-determined, which is to say that you must be able to control your own destiny in your own interests. In the above story you appear, in this sense, to be unfree. You are not in control of your own destiny, as you are failing to control a passion that you yourself would rather be rid of and which is preventing you from realizing what you recognize to be your true interests. One might say that while on the first view liberty is simply about how many doors are open to the agent, on the second view it is more about going through the right doors for the right reasons. Negative liberty therefore refers to the area within which you may act unobstructed by others, an area within which you are free to do or be as you wish to be. If you are prevented by others from doing what you would otherwise do, you are to that degree unfree, and if your area of freedom is curtailed beyond a certain minimum, you may be described as being coerced or enslaved. This does not mean that any curtailment of what you would otherwise do is coercion. Mere inability to, say, jump more than 4 meters in the air or understand the writings of Hegel, is not coercion. Coercion implies the deliberate interference of other human beings in your sphere of freedom. Mere incapacity is not a lack of freedom. This is the sense, i.e. the absence of interference by others, in which classical English philosophers understand freedom. There was disagreement about how wide the area of freedom or non-interference would be. First, because it was agreed that the sphere of freedom could not be unlimited because if every person has unlimited freedom, no person would be free. Second, because they also thought that other goals like justice, equality, happiness, security, etc. were necessary to fulfill human purposes and therefore they deemed it necessary to curtail freedom in the interest of these other goals, or indeed, in the interest of freedom itself. But a certain minimum area of freedom which must be kept sacrosanct so that the individual does not find himself in too narrow a space where he can't exercise and develop his natural faculties, and without which there would be no meaning to human life and human purposes and goals, including that of freedom itself. The idea that one person's freedom is another person's unfreedom is obvious. If I am free to kill you, you are unfree to live. In Berlin's words, the liberty of some must depend on the restraint of others. If freedom cannot be unlimited and has to be curtailed by law if only to secure the freedom of others, upon what principle shall this curtailment be put in place? Those philosophers who are optimistic about human nature and believe that human interests may be harmonized, such as Locke, Smith, and Mill, prefer a large area of freedom. Those who are pessimistic, like Hobbes and his followers, prefer a larger area of control. In any case, that a certain minimum portion of life must be left uninterfered with is agreed by all, and to invade this portion would be despotism and it would degrade our very nature. However, what that minimum must be has remained, and will probably remain, a matter of eternal and irresolvable dispute. The positive sense of freedom derives from the wish on the part of the individual to be their own master, and it consists precisely in being one's own master. But isn't this not so different from the negative sense of liberty? If you are free to choose as you wish, i.e. if you are master of yourself, isn't that the same as not being prevented from choosing what you wish by others? The similarity, however, is only superficial. It is obvious that one could be coerced or enslaved by political, social and economic arrangements. But might not we be enslaved by nature? Or perhaps our own unbridled passions? Passions which we ought to resist or which we do resist at some level in our minds, passions such as tobacco craving. Don't we characterize our emergence from unbridled desire for sexual encounters, and lust for fame, wealth, etc., especially if you subscribe to Christian ethics, as liberating? In any case, the desire to be one's own master is not merely the desire to be free from interference by others, but to be free from our very own desires and passions which we might consider as base or sinful or unbecoming of our nature as members of certain groups, religious or otherwise, or indeed of our nature as human beings. The desire here is to give full power to a higher self, which may be identified with reason, with my higher nature, with the self which calculates and aims at what will satisfy it in the long run, with my real, or ideal, or autonomous self, or with myself at its best. So that it may become master over the lower self, identified with irrational impulse, uncontrolled desires, my lower nature, the pursuit of immediate pleasures, my empirical, or heteronymous self. To illustrate, the smoker in our story provides a clear example of a divided self, for she is both a self that desires to get to an appointment and a self that desires to get to the tobacconists, and these two desires are in conflict. We can now enrich this story in a plausible way by adding that one of these selves, the keeper of appointments, is superior to the other. The self that is a keeper of appointments is thus a higher self, and the self that is a smoker is a lower self. The higher self is the rational, reflecting self, the self that is capable of moral action and of taking responsibility for what she does. This is the true self, for rational reflection and moral responsibility are the features of humans that mark them off from animals. The lower self, on the other hand, is the self of the passions, of unreflecting desires and irrational impulses. One is free, then, when one's higher, rational self is in control and one is not a slave to one's passions or to one's merely empirical self. Many liberals, including Berlin, have suggested that the positive concept of liberty carries with it a danger of authoritarianism. Such justifications of oppression in the name of liberty are no mere products of the liberal imagination, for there are notorious historical examples of their endorsement by authoritarian political leaders. The apparently noble ideal of freedom as self-mastery or self-realization had been twisted and distorted by the totalitarian dictators of the 20th century, most notably those of the Soviet Union. The slippery slope towards this conclusion begins, according to Berlin, with the idea of a divided self by pointing out that some individuals are more rational than others, and can therefore know best what is in their and others' rational interests. This allows them to say that by forcing people less rational than themselves to do the rational thing and thus to realize their true selves, they are in fact liberating them from their merely empirical desires. Because the concept of negative freedom concentrates on the external sphere in which individuals interact, it seems to provide a better guarantee against the dangers of authoritarianism perceived by Berlin. To promote negative freedom is to promote the existence of a sphere of action within which the individual is sovereign, in the sense of developing their own faculties to the full and according to their own inner logic. Personal growth is something that cannot be imposed from without, but must come from within the individual. Much of the more recent work on positive liberty has been motivated by a dissatisfaction with the idea of negative liberty combined with an awareness of the possible abuses of the positive concepts so forcefully exposed by Berlin. In addition, American legal philosopher Gerald McCallum said that there are a great many different possible interpretations of freedom, and it is only Berlin's artificial dichotomy that has led us to think in terms of there only being two.